Well, I was obviously right to happen down the FEUERSCHWANZ rabbit trail of music. I'm very grateful to be able to expand them on my library, not just in keeping my word to many of you. As I said a while back when I finished coverage of D'Artagnan, for those of you maybe that's not a familiar name, German folk rock, and I highly recommend them, I made a promise after I covered about 14 of their works in total. I said FEUERSCHWANZ was next, not just based on affiliation with their frontman, Ben, I forget his last name, but because he's the lead vocalist here, I imagine one of them. Last track we looked at he was, but the endless number of recommendations. I have not received a name reference quite like FEUERSCHWANZ. That one I think has outranked all others. There's been plenty of talents I've spotlighted in this channel that are equally as good, but FEUERSCHWANZ was the chief recommendation from pretty much everybody. That I needed to immediately go listen to this group that I'd never heard of before, but because of, or courtesy of D'Artagnan, I've now found out about. And having just covered, what was the name of the track I just looked at? Meister del Mine. This group has a lot of personality, very similar to how D'Artagnan was for me. I mean, I didn't realize I'd be such much of a folk rock guy. But the individuality of the artist, the creative expression, I love the way the tunes were constructed. German, in the German language as well, there's a beauty in terms of songs preserved in their original languages and not necessarily translated. There's something really interesting about that. I've consulted many groups, not just with German scope. I've also considered, let's say, for example, Sirenia, which is at least one of their tracks, Into the Night, interwove French, and it was quite beautiful. I've got another work lined up in the future. I love that trait. So the personality, again, with D'Artagnan on that level was attractive to me enough, but then the individuality of the artist as well, the musketeer styling. I've never been like a big pirate dude, but I'm like, this whole jive I'm feeling with the music, like I was in a good mood, and those videos were fun to cover. Like I love D'Artagnan. A lot of personality. FEUERSCHWANZ, equally as fun, more metal-centric, or metal rock energy, at least in that bass line with the song. It still has that musketeer energy, even though I know they are trying to go for more of like a medieval image, I believe. It still feels very similar. It's really fun. More aggressive, very comedic. Like the last video was a fun presentation. I can't wait to see where Das Elfte Gebot goes currently as I make my way through FEUERSCHWANZ from a pretty substantial library of their songs. And I'm piecemealing this. This is the second track I'm looking at today, and then I'll consider some other works down the road. I have a total of 14 tracks lined up. But I'm happy to continue on with the journey, like I did with D'Artagnan. It was a wonderful experience there, and FEUERSCHWANZ, equally as fun. And imagine for many of you, you're approaching this knowing who FEUERSCHWANZ is. I'm assuming that many of you have consulted my past coverage in realms to music coverage of what I offer on this channel. If you've been somebody who's recommended FEUERSCHWANZ, of course you know them. There's probably many of you. But there's probably some of you as well who I cover a broad range of artists. Maybe you came across another talent and FEUERSCHWANZ is a new name. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did on that first introduction. Of course, maybe we shared in that together with Meister del Mine, and it was really fun. I can't wait to see where this one goes. Das Elfte Gebot, this is the title track of the album of the same name. It's a title track. It's the third off the lineup. Let's go ahead and consult it. I'm not sure if it's the final track on this album yet. Again, I have to look in detail to what the other 14 were. I know for the future I'm going to be covering at the very least a bunch of their covers that they've done for other mainstream artists. Let's say, for example, they did an ABBA cover. I know they did a cover to The Weeknd. I'm going to consult those, as well as I know specifically I'm consulting the Melissa Bonney collaborative tracks like Warriors of the World, United, and Ding, because I'm a big Ad Infinitum fan. Can't wait to hear those. But let's temporarily gauge Das Elfte Gebot, and maybe for you, this will be a first introduction. Now, I have some familiarity coming off that previous track I looked at, and if you haven't heard Meister del Mine yet, I would recommend it. Let's see where this goes, though, and give you, perhaps, a first exposure if you're in that position. I think you're going to like them. I took it on faith that I would like FEUERSCHWANZ, and I did. My comment section seems to always be right in regards to the realm of music, in terms of the recommended artists. I've liked every one I've heard. I'm going to go ahead and queue up Das Elfte Gebot with the music video in accordance. I'm going to get that lined up and running. And if you're somebody that's not familiar with the way I format my videos in regards to music-related coverage, I try and accommodate listener taste to the best of my ability. So if you're someone that likes to read along with the narrative of the piece, I will not only have, I'm assuming this is spoken of in a foreign language, I will not only have a rough translation, but I will have the official lyrics. I believe they're presented in German, I think. I will have those written for you in the original language as well. So both will pace along with the song accordingly as we navigate our way through it. All right, here we go. Next track of 14. I don't mind taking a long journey, by the way. It's the same count of total I have currently of what I've personally published for D'Artagnan, and I had a great time there. FEUERSCHWANZ, I think, in terms of the entire run of covering them, it's going to be the same impression. Anyway, Here we go. Oh, it's strong. I love it. I knew they were going to do something. Like, I had that suspicion. Metal twist. I like it. Again, this is basically D'Artagnan with a much more aggressive version. And both are fine, but this is like a wonderful journey.
Ist geschlagen, bleigrauer Dunst zieht über ödes Land. Schon liegst du da auf einer.
So Ben led the last track we looked at. Is this routine like they switch roles? Like for one song it's this artist and never it's this artist?
Frag nach der Wahrheit, wie's dir so geht. Und ob du
Not necessarily sure, but it's interesting. I like that model.
das Elfte Gebot.
That's definitely Ben.
Als wartet morgen der Tod. Morgen schon der Tod.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Steht zum Elften Gebot.
Those thick riffs are so attractive.
Der Gebote 10 in Stein geschrieben. Der Gevatter spricht sein Strafgericht.
I like this softer section. It gives the song a bit of a sweetness.
Ich bin geblieben und mein
And methodical pauses. Even though it's still as energetic as ever, and I love that.
Denn das Elfte Gebot gebietet zu leben, als wartet morgen der Tod. Morgen schon der Tod.
The scales are wonderful.
Das Elfte Gebot gebietet zu lieben.
That steady decline is so attractive.
Glühen Flammen lichterloh. Ja, so steht's im Elften Gebot. Das Elfte Gebot.
The individuality among European artists just never ceases to amaze me at all. So attractive. Really is. I look for dynamic individuality in my music.
Besiegt. Denn das Elfte Gebot gebietet zu leben, als wartet morgen der Tod. Morgen schon der Tod. Schon morgen der Tod. Schon morgen der Tod.
That's wonderful.
Ja, das Elfte Gebot gebietet zu lieben und zu verglühen, Flammen lichterloh. So steht's im Elften Gebot.
Great personality to the song. This makes now the third contribution from Napalm Records that I've been madly enamored with. Sirenia, Ad Infinitum have come in advance. Now I can add FEUERSCHWANZ, and probably many more down the line. I think I've got a couple that have come from them as well, from different artists. I'm still making my way through. Again, I've had a long list of recommendations of artists from various European countries, and other places in the world too. I feel like in part I'm taking a globe-trotting adventure of the music that I consult in very familiar fashion gauge on first impressions. Pretty much the entirety of everything I've covered, other than very minor exception with Europe, is all first introduction, at least at some point. But I like taking this journey of first inclination with you. It's fun. Music very much is a... I tend to not like to overuse this word because, again, it's so stated in our society these days, and I like to be a bit fresher, at least in my presentation, but it's interesting to see just how good of and rich of a community builder that music can be, especially in finding associations where you might not observe those in your personal life. I don't have many connections in regards to what connects me to others in my general vicinity. I tend to listen to music that puts me more in an isolated anomaly space. I don't mind it, though. I don't speak like, oh, woe is me. I'm grateful that I found all this talent. I think, if anything, I don't say this to boast. I'm not that much of a bragger, but I think people in my life should be jealous of the talents that I find. Like, all of you are missing out, obviously. That's pretty much been the story of my life since I first started looking at European groups. Everyone that I've consulted openly on this channel I've come into love with, and FEUERSCHWANZ, no different. Exact same devotion. Much like D'Artagnan. I loved D'Artagnan on first listen. I never knew that I would. Sometimes you come across music where it's like, you look at the genre. I mean, let's say, for example, Sirenia or Snow White Blood. I never knew I would like opera, especially woven into metal. And yet I heard those groups. I'm like, hey, opera is actually quite charming. When you weave it into a more aggressive push, sometimes it takes that melding into something a little more organic and unfamiliar. Or at least familiar in some sense, but it takes that connection point to make a music space you might not necessarily find as approachable. It better jives with you. With FEUERSCHWANZ, or D'Artagnan, I never knew I would like folk rock. And yet, it was, as I said many times, nostalgic for me as somebody who took river dance classes for about 10 years and participated in a private troupe. It was their music. I know it's not Irish, but it sounds so similar. It's like right in line. Like, you could easily trade in one tune for another, and we could be doing soft shoe routines to D'Artagnan, and no one would know the difference. It was a nostalgic listen. And the pirate energy, now that I have every album from D'Artagnan on my phone, it's really grown on me. FEUERSCHWANZ is an elevation. It's basically a melding of D'Artagnan and the aggressive metal side of what I normally love in this genre. Again, I tend to go for the more rash and explosive in energy. And FEUERSCHWANZ expresses that adeptly and blends it with a musketeer-type vibe. I know they're going for something, again, like I said, a bit more medieval, but it just sounds so similar to me. Good scope, great atmosphere to the pieces, beautiful range, especially in the instrument use. It's a very dynamic piece. Is that true, by the way? I would open this up to anybody who's familiar with the group in greater depth. And we'll see this probably evolve over time if it is the case. But do they trade roles around, like in terms of vocals? I know some of them are like in supporting capacities on Meister der Mine, which is why I say, is this a trading experience? Because Ben led the vocals on Meister der Mine. And here, I don't know the name of this singer, but again, trading occupancy and prominence in the vocal capacity. If that is something that this group does on a familiar basis, I find that really interesting. Especially for how many people are in this group, it makes sense. And who are we going to hear next? I mean, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head what track I'm consulting next. I have to look at my list in greater detail. But as I've said, I got a total of about 14 incoming. It was a beautiful addition. Like always, with anything I've heard from Ben thus far, but with FEUERSCHWANZ, I'm impressed. I had a feeling I'd like them. Again, I take it on faith based on my recommendations that most of the listeners I have that grace, my videos and provide recommendations to me, it seems endlessly in the comment section. I've taken all into account, as I've said many times. I've got a list that's widely expanding, no matter how much space I'm losing on my phone. Because I buy all my music in advance, so I see the steady increase in use space quite often. But I'm happy to expand that list with, again, every music item that I've purchased and covered thus far has been an easy repeat for me. FEUERSCHWANZ will be no different. Very much like D'Artagnan, I'll be listening to them endlessly, it seems. That's what I was doing after I bought all their albums. And that'll continue over time, and with FEUERSCHWANZ, I imagine it'll be the same. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, whether you are longtime FEUERSCHWANZ fans, and you can answer that question again about the switching of roles, or you're somebody who's engaging this band on a first impression. What are your thoughts? I'd be very curious to hear, again, if you still wish to disclose your respective, what your impression is. I would imagine it's mostly going to range in the positive, much as it is for me. I love groups like this. Again, the individuality that's so present within Europe just is an immediate enticement. And FEUERSCHWANZ is wonderful, in my opinion. Very engaging. This musketeer energy with the bagpipe use must be a German thing. I don't know. But I think more specifically, even beyond just European music, German music specifically is really growing on me. I'm going to have to look even deeper into some of the other maybe associated artists as well. But I like this personality with FEUERSCHWANZ. It's really jiving with me in terms of uniqueness. It's immediately attractive. And Das Elfte Gebot, thus far in my journey with this band, is another fabulous iteration of exposure to their library. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.